All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics and Money. Excited to be with you. We have a very, very interesting topic. How are you, by
Yes,
the way?
I'm good. I'm sorry, guys. I was out of country for a little while, but I'm back and I'm excited to be back.
All right. So we got an interesting topic. I mean, interesting topic in a way that some really smart people, especially in the world of finance, have been warning about it for quite a while. And all of a sudden, we are seeing it now rolling before our own eyes.
Well, so there's a couple of factors to this. So everybody's talking about the Moody downgrade.
Mhm.
So this is a U.S. credit downgrade for those of you who have who have not been necessarily following this, or those of you who have. And it's a credit downgrade for the United States. So the United States used to be AAA, which was like the absolute top of the top, right?
Yeah.
However, this is the third credit bureau now to have downgraded the United States. The first one actually happened in 2011. And
Yeah.
if you look at the reasoning that Moody's gave, this should have happened a lot sooner. So I think the big question on everyone's mind right now is, number one, what is this going to mean,
Yeah.
especially for people here in the United States, but quite frankly, globally as well? Because one of the big issues that we're going to dive into is something that we've talked about on multiple occasions, and that is US debt. Because as we're looking at Trump's big, beautiful bill, which adds maybe $5 trillion more over the next year.
No.
So as we're looking at the
we
the
get
debt,
we get what we vote for. So
well,
whomever voted for.
I mean, okay, so it's more complicated than that, right?
Yeah.
So just like everything else, everyone is panicking, and that's not necessarily wrong. Having all three credit bureaus downgrading the United States is quite frankly bad. Like, there's no good side to it, but I think it's more interesting and nuanced than just like good or bad.
Yeah.
So in this show, we're going to dive into why that's happening, and maybe see if we can unravel some of it. And then we're also going to talk about
Walmart, yes, because the average Americans, I go to Walmart, I buy stuff there sometimes.
I do not go to Walmart.
I do.
What's interesting is a while ago, I sort of implemented this after being young and buying a whole bunch of cheap stuff that kept breaking.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? Even if I buy less things, I would rather buy quality. And I don't care where it's from. I mean, it could be quality from China. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But
I go to Walmart. I buy the car stuff that I need for my car.
Yes.
So that's what I meant by Walmart.
Yeah.
So.
No,
if it
but
is
a lot of Americans do. You're absolutely right.
But I'm looking at the big picture here, because it's again affordability, and that is the key to why now Trump is pissed at Walmart, because Walmart was pushing back by saying, "Hey, the price is gonna go up." In other words, they are giving a warning to average Joe, average Jane, just for them to be aware of what lies ahead. And especially we're going to be entering into the season for the holidays, because usually in the US in July and August, that's where
the summer season.
That's where the products start to come in, and that is one of the issues we're going to be also addressing. So
well, and I think the big issue with that is that now Trump is being sort of made to look like a fool.
Well, he is a fool because he didn't realize that now the tariffs have backfired on him.
Well, here's the thing. I think he did know. So let's dive into this a little bit further, because I think it would be ridiculous for him to not know.
If he did know, then he had no interest in his heart of really representing the average Joe, average Jane. Well, that's to me makes sense, because that means he never deserved.
So okay, here's the thing. So this is a great seg. Thank you for segueing this into what might be actually happening here. Because Moody's, to me, the timing is ridiculous, because this should have happened probably a decade ago. All right. So let's look at Moody's for a second, and let's look at what they actually said. So let me share this with you guys. Because once you take a look at it, you're going to be like, well, Okay, I mean, this should have happened kind of a long time ago. Okay, where are we? Let me add this. So, and like I said, so there's a couple of things we're going to address here because there are a couple of big issues that people are talking about that they're scared of. And I'm not sure that they're the right issues to be thinking about. Okay,
well, while you're looking at that, I'm going to say something about what's going on right now with this idea of where the how this downgrading really does an average person understand, first of all, what it means?
No, for sure not. Sure not. And so that's kind of, I mean, that's kind of why we're diving into it, because the average person doesn't. So the first time this actually happened was during the Obama administration with another credit bureau, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Okay, so let's look at Moody's for a second. So here is Moody's rating. Wow. Moody's rating downgrades the United States ratings from AA1 to AA1 from AAA. Okay, so if you go down to rationale, for more than a decade, the U.S. federal debt has risen sharply due to continuous fiscal deficits. Wow. Okay, yes, that's which longer than that, but okay. Yeah. And I have another slide I'd like to show in a minute. During that time, federal spending has increased while tax cuts have reduced government revenues. As deficits and debt have grown and interest rates have risen, interest payments on government debt have increased markedly. Okay, that is flat out true. And that's a really big warning sign, because basically what they're saying, as we go into it a little bit further here, basically what they're saying is that close to 20% of our revenues actually go to servicing debt right now. And by 2030, 35, it's going to be close to 30% of our revenue that actually goes towards servicing debt. Which would be even worse. Okay. Yeah. The huge problem with that is all of a sudden you have 30% of revenues leaving a country to service debt. And it's not just foreign entities, it's also US corporations that hold this debt. But imagine 30% that we need for stuff like, infrastructure, schools, education, all of that. And so forth. 30% of the average person's tax payment is now going towards servicing debt. I guarantee people are going to be pissed off with that.
This is with the assumption that people truly pay attention to the problem we have here in America. And again, I speak as an American, and I do not generalize, by the way. It's just majority do not pay attention to what's going on. Yeah. I mean, ask now, if I go outside, here's the thing. If I go outside and take a survey right now by asking people one question. Yeah. Do you guys know what happened yesterday in Washington in Congress? Yeah. They're like, what? Well, because the legislation that Trump pushed for the tax cut has passed yesterday, which means benefiting the billionaires. Yeah. So average people do not know. I mean, we don't just point fingers at the government. People needs to take responsibility. I never liked when people shift the blame, all of it to others. Yes, they might be held accountable for whatever, but we have to look inward as well. And this is part of it. So where it's going to be now problematic for the American people is as this, servicing the debt, because our national debt is going up. I mean, now I was looking at the preliminary budget talks regarding the defense. That's something I always look to give me an idea. We're looking already at past $1 trillion.
Well, so defense is an interesting. So this is a very interesting graph, but this is federal debt, total public debt as percentage of gross domestic product, GDP. So as you can see, look, it's obviously been climbing and climbing and climbing. This is since 1966. But it's been climbing, but 2008. Okay. What happened in 2008?
The GFC.
Yeah. And so we have a huge bump after that. And then bam, look at COVID. The COVID years
Yeah.
spiked us like absolute wildfire. So this is a very interesting graph, and we are clearly at a very dangerous point, and it's something
Yeah.
that a lot of people are now talking about.
Yeah.
It was Ray Dalio out there waving the flag for a while, and he was like, "Guys, the debt to GDP is too high."
It's going up. Yeah.
But now it's very clear, and a lot of
Well,
people
that's
are
why it
talking
became
about
now
it.
more evident as to me, the way I look at it with this downgrading, it really
Mhm.
exposed now Trump, really. And I have, once again, guys, to those who, especially our American audience here, now, if you voted for Trump, more power to you. You're entitled to vote for whomever you want. It's just when I provide my criticism, is not because I don't like the person. That's not the case. He's just another human being like you and I. However, I will not shy away from expressing that criticism, because he dragged the country into a deep hole, economically speaking. He wrecked the economy, and not only for the US, even for some other countries around the world. So now to me personally, the way I look at it, this downgrading exposed Trump's erratic policies. And what makes it even more is that China took stand. And by taking stand, you know what they did? Also, what the Chinese did? Exposed the Americans that if you take a stand,
Yeah.
Trump will back down.
Okay.
He will not do it with the weak countries.
Yeah.
He will get away with it with weak countries, but strong countries can take stand.
Well, so here's the thing. I actually don't agree with you on Trump destroying the economy.
Yeah.
The economy was well destroyed before Trump.
Well, he even wrecked it even more.
Here's what I'm trying to say is I actually don't think that's the case. I don't think he did a good job. Please hear me. I don't think he's like some savior. I don't think he did a good job. But what I am saying is that and Trump was president before, so it's not like this is his first time. It's not like he's blameless during this time. If I can put this graph back up here, during his tenure, it's still happening, right? Yeah. We're still accruing massive amounts of debt with Trump. So it's not like he's blameless here, but this has been happening actually for a really long time. And I want to share this like really funny graph from Zero Hedge, because Zero Hedge is hilarious. But okay, so this is Obama 1 and 2. Okay, so this is actually when the first downgrade happened. The S&P downgraded the United States in 2011. And quite frankly, that's probably when it should have been downgraded, if not sooner. So the S&P kind of set the tone a decade and a half ago. Yeah. Okay. And that's when it really should have been downgraded. This is after the 2008 financial crisis, which was first of all, was a setup. And then second of all, was handled so badly that the US absolutely should have been downgraded after that. Okay. Yeah. So they waited, I guess, until 2011. And so the S&P downgraded during Obama. Okay. Yeah. So this is actually bipartisan. It is both parties are being downgraded during. Okay. So but the debt continues to climb. So the debt climbed substantially during Obama. Like that was an unbelievable climb. And if you look at what the cost, so through George Bush into Obama over Iraq and Afghanistan, I mean, it's I think at this point, 5 trillion. And then the cost in inflation, there's a book called Broken Money. My father-in-law recommended it. It's a phenomenal book. It's by Lynn Alden. And she actually talks about from the beginning sort of Iraq and Afghanistan to infinitely in the future, because the war on terror was actually financed entirely with debt. So in the past, other wars had actually been financed partially with debt, partially with taxpayer dollars, partially with, the whole thing. Okay. But Iraq and Afghanistan apparently was 100% financed by debt, or almost completely financed by debt. The problem with that is that we're still paying that off. And so we will continue to pay that off probably till the end of time. So you see this giant trend going up during Obama. And then here it is during Trump. And right here, so I mean, it's still an incline, okay? Like
Going up,
I'm absolutely not going to say this not. This is clearly an incline. Trump did nothing in his first term to cut spending, okay? But right here is where COVID hits. And there is a giant incline. So Trump is the tail at the very beginning of COVID.
Yeah.
And so you see this giant like shooting upwards under vegetable one puppet master, which is the Biden administration, which I thought was hilarious. But that's when Fitch downgraded the US. So the second
I remember that.
downgraded, which, like I said, should have happened like a decade before that. And then this is where Moody's puts US rating for review. So it was actually during the Biden administration that they started putting it up for review. They should have downgraded then. So I'm not saying Trump has done a good job. I absolutely am not saying that. What I am saying is that if he was to blame, it was in his previous term, not in this one.
Yeah, but it contributed to even the policies this time around is much more erratic than they were at the first term. Because remember, we still have the tariffs on the Chinese, for example. There is 120% that I'm aware of still in place from the first term. So with the 30% that they just cut a deal regarding the Geneva summit, the real tariff is not 30%, as they have people believe.
Right.
That real number is 50%, because you put 30% from this term and you add 20% from the previous term. That makes it 50%. So, and that's my point. My point is the idea of this downgrading by Moody sort of really exposed now, because now you're talking about the whole system that needs to have a top to bottom review. Well, and I'm not saying it needs to be done now. It would have been done from way back. But when you got a new president calling that I'm going to resolve the world problems and I'm going to bring the jobs back home, whatever, that's just the moment I heard that personally, I was shaking my head to begin with, because I never believed in a guy or any other politician for that matter. I worked in DC, so I was in the thick of it. So.
Do not trust.
I mean, look at just now what just
for
happened with the guy that was found guilty of bribe in China. He's going to be put to death, executed, and I'm for it. $36 million over 30 years.
Dude, that's a cheap price for his life. He should not have sold out, man.
He should. So my point is, you get involved in something, you're going to deal with the consequences of it. But just imagine if we have a system similar to that we could have the corrupted individuals here, that because the system is protecting them. That is what I'm saying. No matter what we say, no matter what we do, till you sort of reorganize the system from within. I mean, you heard about the gift that Donald Trump got from the Emir of Qatar, right?
Well, he also got
I'm talking about just that one. Just that one for that one.
That's we're gonna have a show coming out actually about that, because Donald Trump's tour of the Middle East. So I believe Donald Trump is trying to secure the petrodollar. That's my take on it.
No, I disagree.
Well, we'll do a show on it, because
Donald Trump wanted to secure the wealth of his family. End of story.
Oh, for sure.
That's what's for sure.
So let's preface it with this. Donald Trump is for Donald Trump.
Well, it's always
he is not for. He could also be for other people, but he puts himself and his family first. Okay, clearly that as a caveat, he always puts himself first. Okay, that is clear. In every single situation.
Let me share a quick story here, because I promised I will share a story regarding this plane. You all know, guys, he got a plane from Qatar, right? Consider a bribe, consider whatever. Beside the point, I'm going to be talking about the legality from the U.S. government perspective as far as policies. When I was in the military, I was assigned to a 3-star general from overseas, from a Middle Eastern country. I'm not at liberty to disclose even to this point that I'm out of the military, but still.
Of course.
Anyway, the general came over with his 2 other generals, 1 colonel, 1 major. This is what specific delegation for. I was assigned for that. Make story short, during the end of his tour, meaning I went with him everywhere because I speak his language, and we were talking, and I was helping him out with understanding a lot of stuff, and there was some other major stuff going on regarding his visit. So anyway, the last day before he left, I was standing at the hotel foyer downstairs waiting for him to come down because I had to take him to the airport along with his entourage to make sure till they get on plane and all that stuff. While waiting there, he came down, all of a sudden waiting on two other generals and the colonel. When the colonel was there, then he told his colonel, he said, "Did you get that gift?"
Oh,
of course I speak the language.
Yeah.
And the colonel answered the general, said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Hand it to Mr. David." And who was standing with us here was my commander, a general, a U.S. general standing there. So one thing that I knew about that culture is if you turn down a gift from a high-ranking person,
For sure.
that's an insult in the culture.
Yeah.
So I looked at the American general just with my eyes, giving him a message that you do not want me refuse this, then we'll deal with it later.
Right.
So I got the nod from the American general, go ahead and take it.
Yeah.
So I took the gift. Anyway, took him to the airport. He took off, and by the time I went back to the military base, I went directly to the headquarters of where I was, because I used to work for a 3-star general.
Yeah.
And I took the gift. When I opened it, it was a watch. I took it to the legal office. Why? Why? Because U.S. laws prohibits any gift from a foreigner that exceeds $25.
Well,
that
I'm
watch
sure
was not $25.
I believe you.
But can you imagine if I didn't turn that in?
Oh,
what would happen to me?
Absolutely.
That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
For Mr. Trump to take a plane. And by the way, the commanding general authorized me to keep the gift.
Oh, wow.
So I kept it. So because he said it's okay. I'm sure they had the record for it.
Yeah.
My point is...
But the point is he didn't take it, and he needed to not take it.
Well, he should have said, here is how it worked. Because here is not what they're going to do. They're going to take the plane and revamp it. Now they're going to be using it for something else.
Yeah.
My point is, Donald Trump should have not got the plane from Qatar. He can say thank you.
Yeah.
But not accept it. That's my point.
But you just said that if he didn't accept it, it would be
to agree with that, but it's still something like that. We're not talking about a basic gift.
Oh no, I'm sure.
But again, you think about what was in it for Trump, not for the country.
Yeah.
How is that going to serve the American people? And that's my point in all this.
For sure. And if he was to take it, it should have been repurposed as, maybe an Air Force plane or something, and not is he taking it as his personal plane?
I don't know.
Okay,
I didn't follow up on it because I don't
because that seems like a security risk.
I don't care for what I do know is that during that trip, there were some other arrangements made.
Yeah.
And the other arrangements, they were about crypto.
Yeah.
Because Donald Trump has the crypto under his name.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, there is a private dinner is going to be held, I think, tomorrow.
Yeah.
For the major donors or the investors in Trump's coin or whatever.
Trump coin.
You know how much they generated for the last 48 hours? $148 million.
Yeah.
So they threw in. So to me, again, it's his life. I don't care what he does.
Yeah.
What I care about is how is that serving the American people who are now struggling.
Yeah.
This is where.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring that up because he's probably the first president where we're watching who's paying him. Because like Obama, for example, Obama entered office being worth a couple million and left worth a lot more.
Yeah.
And I think the most striking difference was what's his name? Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton went in, and don't quote me on these numbers, but when I dove into it, he was worth he went in being worth like 10 million and left being worth like 100 million or $200 million. Right. So this is this is wrong and it's bad, and I think it's bad for government overall, but this is how this game is played.
Yeah.
And Trump is the only one where we're watching.
Is the one in the open.
It's in the open. It's in the
basically,
open.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that doesn't make it right. Okay. Please
course,
hear that.
of
It doesn't
course.
make it right that it's happening, but it's at least out in the open. And, you know, I think that people go into presidencies or into areas of power, even Senate, House, looking to get rich.
Yeah.
You know, it's all, because it's all of them.
Well,
It's
that's
all or almost all of
that's
them.
that's what I'm saying. The system has to be
Even the ones I like. Even the ones I like, right? Like,
I know, but it's the system itself that
Yeah.
has to be.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
Until that's fixed, and nothing's going to change. Once
No.
again, I give this example of what just happened in China yesterday or the day before regarding this individual that is going to be put to death. And to me, it was like, hey, man, you are an official representing the interest of the people.
Yeah.
You know, things eventually will catch up with you. He's been doing it for almost
absolutely.
3 decades.
Absolutely.
I think
That's
he thought
awful
that
it
he's
took
going to
that
get away with
long.
it. Yeah. My point is
Catch
that
him.
to me now, with this downgrading of the system, I am just wondering how someone who is on a fixed income, we're talking about retirees, we're talking about individuals that they can spare an extra expense. How are they going to handle that one?
Okay, so this is a much bigger conversation. And the much bigger conversation is the ways in which governments and central banks basically devalue currency over time. Because this is yet another step in the devaluing of the currency. Okay. So, and right now we're seeing that. We're seeing fundamentally, I think the big concern, because, you know, a lot of people, a lot of the news and all of that is talking about interest rates, like, oh, this is going to cause interest rates to go up. That is not indicative. That is not indicated 100% in the past downgrades, which is an important piece of information. I am going to pull up that graph. Where is it? Here. I don't know where it is. Anyway, here. I don't know. I have this graph somewhere, guys. I'll find it. I have a lot of tabs open at once. But basically, that did not happen across the board the first time, actually, after the first downgrade, the S&P downgrade, interest rates actually went down. And then after the second downgrade, interest rates were fluctuating already, and they just kept fluctuating. So I don't know that interest rates are going to necessarily go like wildly through the roof right now as a result of this. But I do overall, our currency has been so devalued by money printing, by fractional reserve banking. It's been so devalued that you're talking about the average person, and that's who gets hurt the most during this.
For sure.
One of my favorite things, and David, you're going to absolutely love this piece of information. You're going to think it's wild. Okay, so I'm obsessed with this Broken Money book. Thank you to my father-in-law for sending it my way. But so during World War, oh my gosh, my mind is going to go blank. During World War I, I believe, they, instead of so they did this whole push where like, oh, okay, no, I think it's during World War II.
I think I know which one you're going with this.
So the Bank of England, was like, oh, this is so great. Everybody's buying our treasuries. This is perfect. The war bonds, everybody's buying them up. It's so great. There's a huge demand for it. And it turns out almost nobody was buying them. And so the Bank of England literally went behind everyone's back, purchased up the rest of them with money that they created out of thin air, and then lied to everybody about having done it. And then over the next years, people were wondering why their purchasing power was getting lower and lower and lower and lower. And so the US government has done the exact same thing over 100 years at this point.
I forget the name of the guy who was in charge. I know which one you're talking about. And as a matter of fact, he was the one, Sir Richard. I forget his name too, but I know what you're talking about. He was the one who really, still till today, what he said back then still applies. And basically has to do with hollowing the middle class.
Yes, absolutely.
That's exactly what happened. But this also ties to a much bigger picture. And this one has to do with the IBS. That is a
The
much
International Bank of Settlements.
yes,
Yeah.
International Bank of Settlements. It's a much bigger picture because when you think about that entity,
Yeah.
which has what we call the sovereign immunity, you know what it means?
Oh yeah.
That means they are
Absolutely.
above the law. They can be arrested. They can be. That's
Well,
what a
so-
sovereign immunity. The idea is when you think about its members, about 63, two key of them are Bank of New York
Yeah.
that sits on the board.
Yeah.
So you put the two and two together and figure out, because as a matter of fact, what you mentioned earlier about the circulation of money,
Yeah.
how it's all started. It was the U.S. and the Germans at that because we were trying to do reparations.
Yeah.
Who was in charge of that?
Oh,
None other
absolute-
than Dallas. And
Yeah.
Dallas, he was the one overseeing. So basically, the arrangements was made between the U.S. and England at that time.
And quite frankly, what were they thinking?
Oh,
Of course,
controlling them.
what they did to Germany economically, having paying for reparations and all of that. What did they think was going to happen?
Yeah.
They put them into abject poverty. I mean, the way that was financially handled,
Yeah.
what to me was either on purpose, handled that poorly,
And it was,
or it was absolute child's play neglect.
Well, this way will be no different than what we did to Japan.
Oh,
up in the
absolutely.
80s.
Absolutely.
Remember how it valued their currency because we never wanted another country to emerge. Now, here is the key to all this. And this is, again, where you think about the big picture, is that the Chinese have learned from all this throughout the history, watching and observing.
Yeah.
What sort of rattled the Chinese? It was the Asia financial crisis.
Absolutely. It was the Asian financial crisis.
And it made China to start strategize.
Yes.
That's why they are where they are.
Well, and so, okay, I want to bring up a really interesting point that you brought up with China and Asia.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that China has done really, really well is, so instead of buying US securities, right? Because that was for a very long time, that was the thing to do, right?
Yeah.
And it was the thing that made the most sense. Okay, well, as other countries are watching the United States in decline, they were like, okay, well, that's not really the smartest thing to do anymore.
Yeah.
So China, instead of buying US securities, was like, okay, let's do the Belt and Road Initiative. And so they actually built something with their money. They built ports, they built airports, they built tangible assets that would help with what is now primarily Chinese trade anyway.
Yeah.
And so that was a really wise thing that they did, while the United States kept hollowing out the industrial base, hollowing out the middle class. And not only the middle class, but like sort of because the definition of middle class in terms of how much money you make keeps changing.
Of course,
but the middle classes, the US kept hollowing out, right? We've been talking about the fact that the industrial base in the United States has been hollowed out almost completely.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I'm saying about Trump. I'm not saying Trump is not for Trump. Trump is for Trump. There is no question that he puts himself and his family first. What I will say, though, is that he had to do something. Yeah. And I don't know. Scott Bessent is an interesting guy because I think he's smart. There have been plenty of other people in that role who I thought were absolute dolts. And not that he's not a liar, because
he is. He is. Look what both of them said. Both of them said that, the tariff is going to be paid by other countries.
And to some
blatant lie to our faces.
But they also said, to their credit, this is going to be painful.
No, but they are just softening.
Specific.
They are softening the blow. They could have been truthful and say, "Hey, Americans, consumers, you're going to be paying the tariffs." Straightforward, because that's what we are seeing right now.
However, I will say this: it's not like the American public is very good at accepting the truth of things.
Well, they don't.
I do think that relies on Americans also to be really clear. Like, if a politician tells you something that you don't like, but it makes sense, I'm not saying this makes sense, but if politicians were honest, they wouldn't get elected. And so I do think that it's back to the U.S. population that votes to realize that some things are hard decisions. Some things are not all easy all the time. They're not perfectly easy and a perfect trajectory up. Life doesn't work that way. I wish it did. That'd be amazing, but it's not. And so the American population also has to be really honest. You know, the consumerism that we have was put in place by large corporations, right? And we're watching this actually happen with the food industry as companies are getting rid of red food dyes way faster than they're required to because they could have done it the entire time and chose not to. Okay. But the US population didn't stand up and say, hey, this stuff is actually illegal in Europe. It shouldn't be in our food. But the American population didn't do that. In fact, in some cases, people are fighting to keep it.
Yeah. Look when you take a drive outside, see the lines at Chick-fil-A's and all that.
People are fighting to keep it here. So there's a huge degree of putting your head in the sand that's happening. This is my soapbox, but there's a huge degree of putting your head in the sand that the United States is doing right now. Because we were on a bad path. If Donald Trump did nothing, we were screwed. So it's not like he's doing something to harm the wonderful trajectory we were financially on. Like I said, I don't agree with what he's doing, but that doesn't mean that I don't respect the fact that he's trying to do something.
That was something that will benefit him.
Sure, that's wrong.
I don't hold the back on this.
That's wrong.
I don't want to hold the back, and I'll tell him to his face if I ever get a chance. Because to me, it's like I don't care. I don't care as far as what he thinks, whatever. I'll tell him to his face because whatever it is for his benefit.
Well, and he's clearly always been that way.
That's the point. Then why do we have a president if he or she cannot work on behalf of the people? To me, what's the point? What is the point?
No, for sure.
So system is corrupted to its core.
Absolutely.
Its core.
And Donald Trump is feeding into that too. Like, please hear me. I am not a fan of Donald Trump. Please hear me and listen. What I am is trying to suss out what is happening here. Because realistically, Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill, I think it adds $5 trillion to the debt. Okay. So there is a version of this that goes, okay, well, that's not so bad so long as we raise GDP. Okay. So long as GDP raises faster than our debt, it's okay. Okay. I don't personally subscribe to that, but that is a prevalent theory. And I think that that's what he is doing right now is saying, okay, well, as long as we raise GDP, because he is actively working on that, whether he's going to succeed or not, I don't know.
Well, we have 3.5 years to go.
We have 3.5 years to find that out.
A long time.
I hope he does. I hope he actually does bring industry back, not because it's bad to have industry other places or manufacturing other places, but that the United States is hollowed out. But we have nothing tangible here.
Here's the thing. Reality is 3.5 years is not long enough.
No, it's absolutely not. It's absolutely not.
There will be no manufacturing coming back here because you need a minimum of 5 years at least to set up everything. I just don't see how.
It depends who comes in next, and we just don't know what that is.
I'm a realistic guy. I see things for how they are, assess them based on their merit that way.
Well, but the thing is, I'm also realistic, and I am looking at the places in which Donald Trump is going. Please hear me. I don't like Trump or dislike Trump. It is not about him. It's about objectively looking at he is our president right now. And he is the one going out and doing these things. So it is about objectively looking at what is he doing, number one, and what are the ramifications of it. And he caused this during his first term. He was part of the problem. Okay. So I'm not saying that he was like some savior because he was part of the problem in his first term. Okay. Still problem. So what is he doing in his second term now? Because he's doing crazy stuff. He's doing a lot of big, crazy stuff. But one of the things that he's doing is he is going out and trying to get industry to come back here, get investment to come back here. However, that's more debt.
Yeah.
So is that a good thing? Is
and-
that a bad thing?
And the thing is, looking for the investments, there is no trust in the American system. There's no
There
trust. That's why there will be
shouldn't
no. I mean, you look at now where things are, the value of the dollar against the euro, for example. You look at
Sure.
now, even when you start to think about how now the European Union sort of wanted to crack down on gold
Mhm.
because they are nervous that
absolutely.
you know, it's to
Absolutely.
me was
That's
like
insanity.
yeah, and to me that gives you an idea about how much faith has been lost into the
Yeah.
American system per se. As a matter of fact, I go
EU
back
system
to
too.
yeah.
EU system too.
Well, EU system is done for because they followed blindly the US. Look where they are at. I want to go back to one point you mentioned about China's BRI. In addition to the BRI, China also has been purchasing gold. They knew.
Yes.
They knew.
Russia also.
Yeah. They
And
knew that the
Poland.
value of the dollar is not going to hold forever.
And the thing is,
Yeah.
they knew that a long time ago. That's why
Yeah.
they started, instead of funneling their money, because US securities used to be what was safe and stable. But
Yeah.
as that stopped happening, which was a long time ago,
Yeah.
as that started happening, China did the right thing. They did the smart thing. And a lot of people are really anti-China, but China took care of themselves
Well, they have
in
to,
that
yeah.
situation. They did not, I think they did the right thing investing in the BRI. And the US should have done a similar thing. The US, instead of potentially investing in massive military,
Yeah.
the US should have invested in global infrastructure. It should have invested in trade and economics, which it didn't necessarily. And it used its military. The United States used its military basically to bully people in the economic sphere. The problem is that as other countries get more power, they are less and less able to be bullied. And as the United States has less and less power, they are less able to bully other countries economically. So China did the right thing. I think they did a very, very smart thing with the BRI.
Yeah. The US, it's not the military was only used as a foreign policy tool. So what the US did mainly has to do with the currency. That is the reason why the fear right now in the US regarding the decline of the US dollar, because that was the whole decision that was made after the Bretton Woods for that specific reason, to ensure that the dollar is always remain. This is why, like so many now will be wondering about, hypothetically, you go with the idea of what will replace it. You know, this is why the EU cracking down on gold. They don't want gold to even be in circulation per se, because the fear that if people move into, as you know, because gold can still store value.
Absolutely.
Because it's always been, is that fear of losing that. Look now what's going on in Africa, for example.
Yeah.
Because why those countries, especially in the Sahel region, they tend to now use and explore gold for themselves.
Which, quite frankly, they should have, like,
it's theirs.
Colonialism was awful in every way.
I mean, when you think about France being the fourth, here is where the kicker. France being the fourth largest gold reserves in the world. And France has no gold mines whatsoever.
I know. That was awful. It was awful. It was wrong, absolutely, in every way.
And this is why, you know, you start to think in terms of and I've been thinking about this one. Okay, hypothetically, we go that route of what is going to be replacing it.
Yeah.
You know, some have argued, you know, you put a basket of currencies. No other country, I don't think so, in my opinion, country that can financially do it, which only few, and even those few are limited. I'm talking about China here. China will be only the one in position to do it economically and financially. But China doesn't want to have its currency as the global reserve.
So
what China wants is the bilateral trade. Which is a smart move.
And I'm curious to see as we go forward what kind of is, because the whole deal is there has to be like a safe storage of value. Gold seems to be one of those places.
That's one.
It's been one of them for a really, really long time. And so I'm curious to see overall, though, because people are not going to trade in gold, right?
Yeah, not all, but you see a lot of people moving into sort of crypto aspects of it, because they start to. I don't know if you saw the market today, where crypto is.
Yeah.
So you kind of, no matter how you look at it, still at least a venue for when people can at least have something that
People are
it's-
looking for something solid.
and out of the control of the government.
Absolutely.
Because now, as you may know, guys, whether you know or not, there is a conversation in the EU as far as CBDC moving forward, which is a big problem.
If you're in the EU,
big problem. Because
obviously do what you
yeah.
want, but don't let that happen.
don't let that happen, because think about during the time of the COVID, how it was, meaning the government can dictate this and dictate that.
Absolutely.
And if they have access to controlling the finances, you know what
I
it
know.
means.
Well, if you control someone's finances, you control them.
Oh, that's
straight
it.
up. I mean, there's no.
Well, look what we're doing with sanctions.
Absolutely. And I do think that sanctions are something that has actually led to the downfall of the US and the dollar.
Well, we abused it. We abused it.
Absolutely. I think that's
Straightforward. We
absolutely
abused
true.
it. So, and that's why I don't see how the next 3.5 years is going to be a very, 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 very challenging.
I'm very interested to see what it's going to be the next three and a half
I don't
years.
know how it's going to move forward with that. Let me say thank you to Nini. Thank you so much for your super sticker.
Yeah, thank you.
Truly appreciate you for that. And we're going to, Francis
Hey,
Tango.
Francis Tango.
Thank you very much. There is a question there. What does Trump actually want to build in 4 years? That's a good question.
Okay, so that is a good question. Do you want to answer first?
No, you go ahead. Ladies first.
Well, thank you. So I think it's twofold. So first of all, okay, let's get this out of the way. Trump wants to set himself and his family up as best as possible. Okay, so we know that. The next thing is that I think that he is trying to set up AI.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a huge artificial intelligence push because whoever wins the AI race is who kind of wins the global economy. So he's pushing very hard for AI. Now, I think that there was a huge shock and blow with DeepSeek because all of a sudden it became infinitely cheaper to do AI, whereas we have billions and billions and billions coming in to build up this AI infrastructure.
50 to be exact.
It's more than that now because of the Saudis and because of because of Qatar.
They're gonna do this separate with the
So we have literally, I mean, I think it's like trillions at this point in this investment. Okay, so I think he's trying to build up artificial intelligence, and that because, like you said, David, he may be crazy, but he's not stupid, and he knows that manufacturing, in the sense that it once was, is not going to come back here. Our factories are not going to look like the ones in China. Yeah. That's just ridiculous. It's just not going to happen that way. But what might happen is a manufacturing hub might come in, and artificial intelligence will manufacture through manufacturing robots, will manufacture XYZ, whatever it is, and maybe 5 or 10 people will be running it. So I see very much a utilization for artificial intelligence. You want to know something that kind of made me a little bit sad actually about AI? This is not related to Trump, but this is that the number one use for AI last year and this year is companionship and therapy.
Wow.
For ChatGPT.
Wow.
People are primarily using it for companionship and therapy.
Yeah.
That shook me in a very sad way. Because that is the loneliness epidemic, I think, is probably the worst.
Well, we are an individualistic society. We only think about ourselves.
But the thing is, that's programmed really early on.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
It's send your kids to daycare from the time they're born on. Yeah. You need to be fiercely independent. You can't need anybody. It's the American way, but it's awful. And it's messed up a lot of people. But it's been that way for a long time. It's the rugged individualism, because how can you take both parents out of the home if you don't have everybody be out on their own? It's insanity. So I think that the AI push, and I think he is trying to lower the debt to GDP ratio. Whether he's going to succeed or not, I don't know, because I don't see I don't see cuts in the way that, because even Doge, like they came out and they were like, we're gonna cut a ton of money, and then they've cut like fractions, and then Elon Musk was like, I don't want to do this because people are mean to me. Well, like, okay, have you seen how mean they are to Trump? Like people are suffering, so it's hard. So I do think he's trying to deal with the debt, but I don't know whether he's going to succeed or not. So that's my take on it.
Mine will be two. One of them has to do with his permanent legacy. That's what he wants. Yeah. And second one has to do with something in space. He want to put weapons in space. That's what he wants to build. The Golden Dome. And that's basically in a reference to the placements of weapons in space. So all these hypes about manufacturing coming back to America, that's nothing. That's the two key things that he really after. But the space one, that's very, very important, because you have to understand where the financial system is headed. And as to why. It's because there is this kind of inclination towards moving up to space. It's almost like having another presence in another dimension up there. And the only reason for that, it has to do with exploitation of rare elements. And this might surprise you, is because who will after that is the billionaires and the ones with the funding. You get Bezos, you get Musk, and all this. You get the idea.
You get like celebrities in space.
And this is why you have to understand how the financial system is working and all this. Because right after, I remember, because I got to DC right after 9/11. So, and what was important about that, the one aspect from the financial is how much money has been allocated into the security arena. And the security arena, the 9/11 was nothing but just a cover-up. So
a lot of people
where the money ends up being, because where the money ends up being is the insurance of ensuring that you have like some sort of technical coverage for all your transactions. This is why you have, I mean, think about it, guys. When you drive nowadays, you leave your house and your phone will already tell you you are 10 minutes from the gym or 15 minutes from the gym. You have companies that already competing for you, not one or two, but 50 or 80 are competing for you. And the other thing has to do also with ensuring the presence of many satellites that can control all those movements pertaining to financial aspects of it. This is where the IBS comes in, the international International Bank of Settlements. So if you ever go to Switzerland, go to Basel. That's where it's headquarters.
It's interesting because this has started coming out more and more. Like what you were talking about with 9/11 is that right before 9/11 happened, which like that was probably one of the worst. It changed the United States for the worse. I mean, it was awful. The whole thing was awful.
The plan of it was,
but that Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld came out and said $2.3 trillion was missing. Oh, is it four?
4. Actually, that was right around that time. And that's where it gives you an idea, guys, just to understand.
It was right before it.
For you to understand the influence of the IBS, the International Bank of Settlements. They can move money secretly. They can take out 10 trillion, 20, 30, whatever amount. If they want from the US government, nobody will ever know. And they won't even know where they are. They'll park them on some balance sheet somewhere. Nobody will ever know. That's how powerful they are. So you start to ask yourself, who gives them that kind of power and all that stuff? But else you have to go back into history all the way to 1913 when it all started, and World War I, then World War II, and so forth. So that's a conversation for another day. But just to highlight to you all this, you tie it to the daily life of an average citizen. That's why, like I always say, an average citizen, he or she is going to be worrying about what's for dinner. They can't be
or
thinking.
their latest TV show, or
Yeah, they're not
whatever.
gonna be thinking in those terms.
It's really frustrating in a sense,
It's
because
unfortunate.
David, you've probably seen this happen over the course of your lifetime, but
Yeah,
my dad absolutely has seen it, and that is that I think people actually knew more about what was going on when you guys were younger. Like, I think that there was a greater sense of discovery, a greater sense of this is what we're doing. I mean, yes and no, because
yeah.
there's stuff like the moon landing and stuff that
Oh,
is
yeah, yeah.
if you
What I knew back then as a kid
Mhm.
is that what the government is saying, I always, as a kid, believe it or not, I used to
Mhm.
think always the opposite of what they were saying.
Yeah, well, that's
Because
probably
my
the
level
truth.
of
That's
thinking
probably
at
the
that
truth.
time, you're a
Yeah.
kid, 11-year-old. What you gonna be thinking about?
But I think that there was like a sense, and especially even like during the Vietnam War and all
Yeah,
of that, there maybe was a sense that you guys actually were more involved and knew a little bit more about what was going on. Right now, life is so complex that I think, and people have been, especially in the United States, have been dumbed down so dramatically
Yeah,
that I think it's and it's not just like stuff like food insecurity. It's stuff
yeah.
like people are sick and dying really young. And so you have to be really careful with your health. You have to be really careful with your finances. You have to be careful with investing. Like you have to focus on so many things that I don't know. I think it's really hard. It's really hard right now. And I think that knowledge has more or less been sucked out of, or even that desire to know has been sucked out of.
Let's say thank you to Francis once again for another
Oh,
super
thank
sticker.
you.
And the question reads: is the Arab money? I think what you meant, Francis, is that whether the Arab money they give into the US is a bribe. Well, I would say yes, it is in a subtle way. The Saudi is not going to be investing $600 million, which is a drop in a bucket. Yeah. Think about it. It's the Emiratis, the Qatar, all of them. Like I always
Qatar
say,
did $1 trillion. I think it's like 1.1 trillion or something.
Like I always say, it's all about the survival of their monarchies. They care less about their people. They care less about and if they can bribe their way, why not? Especially if they found a person like Trump or any other president for that matter. I'm not saying all of them are crooks. There might be some decent. There is always some decent people somewhere. But
you mean
for
presidents?
Well, believe it or not,
not for a while.
the presidents are sometimes forced to toe the line, believe it or not. Usually the tradition is that when a new president comes in, there is a folder in a White House in the drawer, the first right drawer on the right, always there for the next president. That is the first thing a new sitting president will have to do, is to open that folder and take a look. So you start to, there are certain how should I put it? Certain conditions, if I may use the term, that, in other words, those are a red line. Those are you don't waver from and you follow through. Straightforward. So presidents understand, despite there might be good intentions, but they will be forced, and I use the term forced, to toe the line. So that's just unfortunate.
I think that's true. And then also, like, I'm really curious because the petrodollar has sort of been what kept the United States, especially the US dollar, where it was. And the petrodollar is going away. Now it's not gone. Okay. So let's be clear. It's still very powerful. The petrodollar is very, very powerful, but it is headed the direction of not being anymore. And especially as the Saudis, for example, have been part of that. They have no longer upheld the gold in dollars only. And it's been a couple of years that they haven't upheld it. So I'm curious, and that relationship under Biden really soured. And so I'm interested to see, like they weren't picking up the phone for Biden. And I mean, Understandably, Biden was, oh my God, like it's now coming out like how how much of a decline we all saw it. If you guys had 2 eyes, you could see
You will
it.
see it.
But they were lying. The government was lying and lying and lying and lying. And now all of a sudden they're like, this is insanity. So I am interested to see sort of how that changes the relationship going forward. Because if the US wants to hold on to reserve currency status, which it may or may not, the reserve currency status has certainly come with the perk of printing money. However, it's also come with the detriment of printing money and many other things, including basically having to police the world to keep it as a reserve currency, which has been extremely costly. So I don't know whether it's actually the best thing for the United States or not to keep the reserve currency, or whether a multipolar system is a much better one, which quite frankly, I think it is. That's my personal opinion. So I'm interested to see how that relationship progresses. And like I said, if you guys are curious, we're going to do a whole show on this, on what just happened with the US and the Middle East.
All right, let's say thank you to Army with Harmony as always. And I couldn't agree more with your statement.
Yes, David cannot say it out loud.
Man, if I'm given the authority for one day to rule on something, that would be that. And I'll do it my way. I can't say it here.
Yeah, you can't say it here.
So thank you so much for your support. So I truly appreciate you guys. Well, you guys, hope you enjoyed this conversation. Of course, we're going to be addressing more topics moving forward. Make sure to drop us some comments in the comment section. And if this is your first time here, remember to subscribe. We greatly appreciate your support. All right, guys, you guys take care. Till next time. Bye-bye.